Good morning on this Sunday, August 20th, 2017, and the headlines on today's Washington Journal focus on free speech as demonstrated in protests and rallies across the nation yesterday. The largest took place in Boston, where a free speech rally organized by right-wing groups drew dozens of demonstrators, but was met by a counter-protest of roughly 40,000 people who held signs and chanted in an effort to, as one participant said, drown out bigotry. The rally itself ended early, and organizers and participants were escorted out of Boston Common by police. And despite some scuffles and arrests, the protests were largely peaceful and drew praise from city leaders as well as from President Donald Trump. So today we are asking our viewers, should hate speech be protected by the First Amendment? Republicans can call 202-748-8001, Democrats 202-748-8000, and independents can call 202-748-8002. You can also reach us on social media, on Twitter at CSpanWJ, and also on Facebook at facebook.com/CSpan. And we'll start off by taking a look at the headlines out of Boston, where that very large counter-protest took place yesterday. The front page of the Boston Herald says, common sense, 33 arrests, no serious injuries in minor skirmishes, and also points out that cops keep the peace as 40,000 counter-protesters upstage free speech rally. We also have headlines today out of the Boston Globe. It says, making a stand against racism, resolute and ready they marched. It says, rally by tens of thousands is peaceful but pointed. It's the top of the news today coming out of Boston. More from the Boston Herald. It says that, bear with me just one moment here. It says, a tidal wave of 40,000 peaceful counter-protesters drowned out a so-called free speech rally on Boston Common yesterday afternoon before the shouts and chants from the crowd gave way to clashes in the streets when participants swarmed police officers who were transporting rally-goers away from the scene. The highly anticipated rally, which drew just a few dozen conservative demonstrators, was scheduled to be held from noon to 2, but ended an hour early when small groups of rally participants were escorted away from the Parkman Bandstand by some of the 500 police officers who were keeping the peace. So we're asking you, should hate speech, get First Amendment protection? Marvin's on our line from Philadelphia on our Democratic line. Good morning, Marvin.
Yes, it's kind of hard to speak on it because if that's the case, then Hitler and the Jews, they should be speaking about. It's like opening up a Pandora's box from the past of things that didn't happen. And when you speak on stuff like that, you're speaking on a lot of people that done been killed, raped, and everything else. We are basically like getting over the past and trying to come together. Why should we open up Pandora's box again?
Well, Marvin, let me ask you, the idea of protecting free speech from our founders was on the idea that the best remedy for speech that we don't like is more speech, different speech, giving our points of view. Do you think that that marketplace of ideas is the best way to work out our issues?
Well, if that's the case, then the Jews and whatever happened with Hitler, then people should have a right to talk about that too. You shouldn't have a right to talk about stuff when it hurts people so deep that it ain't even no resolution to it or why it happened. So no, I don't think that it should be. I don't think that part of free speech should be allowed.
Okay. Okay. Brian's calling in on our Republican line from Salt Lake City. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
And what are your thoughts today?
What we need to do is check our history. The Republican Party was the Whig Party. In 1868, 140 black politicians, that you guys don't know about this, and 30 white politicians started the Republican Party. And the reason you don't hear about it is because of Woodrow Wilson. Wrote the books, I think there's 6 books, A History of America. And he segregated our military. Woodrow Wilson's the most racist president we ever had. But Charles Sumner kept standing up in 1868, fighting for the rights of black people. A Democrat beat him with the inch of his life with a cane. And the Democrats, oh God, it makes me so mad that the people don't know our history.
Well, Brian, let me ask you this. Aside from Democrats and Republicans, just speech that is seen by someone, who, regardless of who speaks it, that's seen as hate speech, do you think that should get the same type of First Amendment protection as other speech?
Speech everywhere. You talk more. That's how we get along. You need to talk about it, but you need to teach people of the history. David Barton wrote a book, Jefferson Lies. You know, everybody says Jefferson had black kids. No, his brother did. But Jefferson could not free his slaves. He wanted to, but he paid them. But he couldn't free them because the law said if you are in debt, you have to pay your debt. So instead of paying his debt, he paid his slaves. And this just goes on and on. You know, the Democratic Party is the Robert Byrd. He was part of the Ku Klux Klan. And the Democrats just wheeled him in a wheelchair. Have you guys cut me off yet?
No, Brian, but we have a lot of callers, so we're going to go on to Sean, who is calling from St. Cloud, Minnesota, on our independent line. Hi, Sean.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Do you think hate speech should be protected?
What I would like, yes and no, and it's the duality of it, and it's some of the things those guys say, some things make sense and are relevant, and so we should give them a platform to hear what they're saying and engage where they're coming from. Because I remember seeing the things that happened last weekend in Virginia, and they were addressing that Jews will not replace us. But all I see is organizations that have the black interest, which I'm a brother, and homosexual and the gay agenda. Why aren't they don't have Jewish organizations up speaking? Because that's what is one of the specific points they made. And another thing is, I'll just listen. Thank you so much, and you look great, and you do a great job, and you're a credit to your race, the human race.
Okay.
Good morning.
A little bit more from yesterday's rally in Boston from the Boston Globe. It said the local impetus for the massive demonstration on Boston Common was a rally planned before Charlottesville by the Boston Free Speech Coalition, a group that claims to promote open dialogue, but that civil rights advocates say is linked to people who espouse racial hatred and violence. Coming a week after the Virginia violence, the Boston Free Speech rally generated a massive response by residents and law enforcement officials. I think it's clear today that Boston stood for peace and love, not bigotry and hate, said Mayor Martin J. Walsh in a late afternoon news conference yesterday. John's calling from Norwich, Connecticut on our Republican line. Do you think hate speech should be protected, John?
Yeah, of course. All speech should be protected. I just want to say that I tried going to the rally yesterday. I'm a Trump supporter, not a neo-Nazi. That rally wasn't about being racist or anything like that. It's about people being able to say what they want. And I'm just glad you did show one picture. The only animals that were violent yesterday in throwing urine on police and protesters were the people on the left. And they were violent yesterday. They were throwing urine, and people were arrested. That's all I want to talk about today, is how they were violent yesterday. But I don't suppose that that's going to be talked about too much. I just want you to keep putting the pictures up of them throwing bottles of urine at police and the people that were being nonviolent yesterday. And that's pretty much all I want.
Well, John, I want to ask you a question. What prompted you to try to go to the rally yesterday? What was your motivation? Because
I don't like the feeling that everyone that's associated with being a Trump supporter is a racist now. That's crap. That's not intellectually honest. It's not. It's the easy way out of arguing that you don't like his stuff, and it just people want to. You can't silence any speech. I mean, the fact that people don't understand that is more scary than anything. And just please, 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 the left was violent yesterday. They were the ones causing violence and throwing urine on people, and I just can't stress that enough. I mean, I was there. I saw it. It's easy with 30 or 40,000 people throwing urine on 30 people. Oh, that's very brave. Yeah, real brave, guys. Well, we'll keep fighting. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, Carmen's calling in from Hamilton, Montana on our independent line. Hi, Carmen.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to say that everybody's calling in defending hate speech today. I don't care about the First Amendment. I think hate speech should be stricken from it. Nobody should speak any hate anywhere, foment any kind of disruption and eventually killings and everything that happens all the time. I want every one of you men and women to look into your families. I don't care if you say you're a Trump supporter. You're a racist. I don't care who you profess to be. Look in your family histories and see how many of your uncles and brothers and grandfathers that were killed by Nazis, okay? This Nazi crap that's going on is just a cover-up for your ignorance. You people are ignorant. You need to be evolved. You need to find out what peace and love is all about. This crap of walking down the street. Am I still there?
Yeah, Carmen, but just last words. We need to get to the other callers, too.
I'm just sick and tired of my whole life. I'm 69 years old. I was in the Vietnam War. I fought with my black brothers and my brown brothers over there, and this is not what we ever stood up for this country for. You people that are out there fomenting all this hate, every one of you, I hope they throw a law saying there's no more hate speech, and next time you're out on the street, every one of you are thrown in jail, and you get to get in there with some black and brown people, and you find out what life is all about.
Okay, we're going to go on to Ed, who's calling from Waterbury, Connecticut, on our independent line. Ed, do you think that hate speech should get First Amendment protection?
Well, again, without free speech, we have no freedom in this country. Now, again, hate speech, there's some, they spill it, but there's some truth when people express their opinion. Now, here's another interesting thing in my observation of this. In every case, no one looks at the left and the violence that they were promoting at every one of these rallies. Now, think about this. They intimidate people coming there to honestly express their freedom of speech and their opinion. Now, it seems to me, and I watch the corporate media, they never show these violent agitators who, by the way, are getting paid. They're getting paid to show up there to break up the idea of free speech. We need free speech to protect the democracy of this country. Now, some might not agree with it, but without it, we have no freedom. And if anyone, look at these countries where dictators run the entire country, they stop freedom of speech. We need it. It'll protect our freedoms. But why doesn't the news show these people doing this violence, intimidating people who are there for free speech? I don't understand it.
Okay. And from the opinion pages of the New York Times earlier this week, there was a piece that talked about the ACLU urging it to rethink its stance on defending some speech. It says the ACLU has a long history of defending the First Amendment rights of groups on both the far left and the far right. This commitment led the organization to successfully sue the city of Charlottesville, Virginia last week on behalf of a white supremacist rally organizer. That rally ended with a Nazi sympathizer plowing his car into a crowd, killing a counter-protest and injuring many. After the ACLU was excoriated for its stance, it responded that, quote, preventing the government from controlling speech is absolutely necessary for the promotion of equality. Of course, that's true. The hope is that by successfully defending hate groups, its legal victories will fortify free speech from across the board. Rising all tides lifts all boats, it goes, but the piece goes on to say that the ACLU should rethink that stance. Since this piece was published, the ACLU announced that it would no longer defend people who bring weapons to a rally as they did in Charlottesville. Ruth is calling in from Pennsylvania on our Democratic line. Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
And what do you think about free speech protection for hate groups?
Well, I think we have one inalienable right to be happy. Everyone has happiness as a given when they're born in this country, and I think hate speech interferes with that right, because if you're going to be chanting hateful things, somebody else is hurting, and that's not that gets in the way of everyone else's happiness. So I don't believe that should be protected, my view. And thank you for hearing me.
Okay, Adam is calling in from Dallas on our Republican line, one of the cities where there were demonstrations yesterday. What do you think, Adam?
Yes, good morning. I'm an African-American Republican for economic reasons, and I lived in deep West Texas where racism is a little bit more in your face. With that being said, absolutely yes, First Amendment should be protected in all forms. Because if we start chipping away at it, then it becomes a very slippery slope. And so, no, I don't support violence. No, I don't support hatred. But First Amendment right is in of itself sacred. And I'll take any comments off there. Thank you.
Adam, let me ask you a question. I mean, what about, do you think there are any limits to speech? I mean, aside from, for example, limits set out by courts that say you have free speech, but you can't shout fire in a movie theater because that will could put people in danger. Do you think there are times that hate speech can put people in danger?
No, that's an outstanding question, and I am currently struggling with that very question. I'm erring on the side of no, simply because we have to protect whatever the form. What happens when it's the left that so-called says, quote unquote, hate speech? Well, we have to protect the First Amendment on both sides and figure out how to quell the violence in between. But it's a very scary thing if and when we start chipping away at the First Amendment, trying to protect so-called hate speech. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And more from the New York Times about the protests in Boston and elsewhere in the country yesterday. It says demonstrations were boisterous but broadly peaceful, even as tension and worry coursed through the protests from Boston Commons, the nation's oldest public park, to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and to the bridges that cross the Willamette River in Portland, Oregon. Other rallies played out in Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, Memphis, and New Orleans, among other cities. The Times piece goes on to say that law enforcement officials were on alert throughout the day, wary of being seen as irresolute and ineffective after the protests in Virginia turned into running street battles and turned fatal when someone drove a car through a crowd. Officers in riot gear sometimes faced off with demonstrators to maintain order, but there were scattered scuffles and arrests. In Boston, the site of the largest of the weekend's protests, the police said there have been 33 arrests, mostly involving charges of disorderly conduct. Crystal is calling in on our Republican line from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Crystal, what do you think? Do you think hate speech should be protected the same way other speech is?
I do not. And I've been to Iraq 3 times to fight for a right to free speech. However, with hate speech, I don't think it's acceptable. I do think that it incites violence, but I think that hate speech across the board should not be allowed. So it should not be allowed against different races. It should not be allowed based on your sexual orientation, but it should also not be allowed if you're speaking in terms of police. So if they're going out and calling police pigs or throwing things in their face or throwing urine on them, I don't think that should be protected either, because I think that falls in the same category. So I think it should be eliminated across the board, that it's not protected.
Right. And Jessica is calling in from Sparks, Nevada on our Democratic line. What do you think, Jessica?
Thank you for taking my call, first of all. And certainly, yes, I do appreciate the fact you have freedom of speech, and I believe that freedom of speech is fundamental to our democracy. However, on various platforms and in group situations, especially when they are armed with and coupling their quote-unquote freedom of speech with the right to bear arms, then we have to take a close look at the intent that they are supposedly trying to create. Are they intentionally trying to, with that hate speech, incite riot? Are they intentionally trying, and unequivocally, I would have to say across the board, hate speech of any kind should be denounced. It is not democratic. It is not fundamental. It is not in keeping with our Constitution. And it should be stopped as inciting riots.
So, Jessica, what do you think should be done for people who promote hate speech? What do you think that the punishment should be? That's something which is going to have to start within the state, wherever that particular issue has occurred, and then work its way up through the courts and into D.C., Washington, D.C., and the Supreme Courts probably. But more than not, I would have to say that those who are participating in inciting a riot should be judged accordingly at the state levels first, and then taking it on up the ladder to the Supreme Court. But certainly, this is how Nazism began. This is how the fall of Germany began. And we have to learn from history, move forward in accordance with the platforms of our democracy, and keep our constitutional rights at the same time. And it begins with not allowing one to use their fundamental rights of speech and freedom of speech to incite a riot, B, undermine the democracy itself. So I do believe that there should be some sort of a state action taken by the courts that would be appropriated by the committees that are overseeing that. Okay. And looking at some reaction to yesterday's protests in Boston, the mayor of Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh, tweeted a response to a tweet from President Trump yesterday. President Trump had tweeted, "Great job by all law enforcement officers," and Boston Mayor Marty Walsh. And Mayor Walsh responded, "Today, Boston stood for peace and love, not bigotry and hate. We should work to bring people together, not apart." Ruth is calling from California on our independent line. Ruth, what do you think? Should hate speech be protected?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think, generally speaking, yes. However, when it is an act of violence or incites violence, I do believe our Constitution draws the line there, although I don't have a copy of it right in front of me to look it up. So I must admit, I'm not sure I'm correct about that. But in the workplace, for example, when there's zero tolerance to violence, that includes verbal violence. So,
and what would you consider verbal violence, Ruth?
Well, in the Charlottesville footage, there were some people who were, saying, "We will kill you," or "We will hurt you," or "We will do something to you," or "People should die," or something like that. I don't exactly remember the verbatim things I heard, but it was clearly threatening, and not just verbally, but physically threatening. And to approach a church with torches, how reminiscent is that of some of the things that have happened in some places in the United States with the Ku Klux Klan, for example. So,
all right.
So I think that it does not promote reasoned dialogue, where yes, you're free to express your opinion, but not to the point where you block, listening to the other side. Okay. And also, do you need to carry guns to have your opinions?
Okay. And there were guns being carried in the Charlottesville demonstration, but weapons were banned at the Boston event. A little bit more about the question of free speech protection of all speech in this piece by Vox. It says, "There is no question that Americans have the right to express racist, offensive, unpopular views under the First Amendment. It's a right that has been repeatedly upheld by the Supreme Court. But the right-wing demonstrators in Charlottesville, Virginia last weekend may have gone too far when they began chanting racial and homophobic slurs at specific people. It's a gray area area of constitutional law, but several experts said this week that the white supremacist may have crossed the line in what is known as unprotected speech. In a 1942 Supreme Court ruling, it held that fighting words are not protected under the First Amendment. The court defines fighting words as, quote, those which by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. Terry's calling in from New Jersey on our independent line. Hi, Terry.
How are you?
I'm good. What do you think? Do you think that hate speech should get First Amendment protection?
I think all speech should get our protection. Our forefathers were geniuses when they made the Constitution, and people are chipping away at that. People are swimming here for our freedoms. And once we start chipping away at our freedoms, it'll all go away, and America will go away. I congratulate Boston. They showed that you can have demonstrations and peacefully. And they just had controlled it themselves. They had the police there. They did the right things. Charlottesville kept their police back. They could have prevented different things. I feel that way, anyway, in my opinion. And the freedom of speech is vital to this country. Vital.
Okay.
And people, you may hate what people say, but we should defend it, period.
Okay, and let's take a look at some of the Twitter reaction from the president yesterday during and after the protests in the Boston area. During the initial protest, he tweeted, "Looks like many anti-police agitators in Boston. Police are looking tough and smart. Thank you." Then later on, after the event, he said, "Our great country has been divided for decades. Sometimes you need protest in order to heal, and we will heal and be stronger than ever before." And then his final tweet, "I want to applaud the many protesters in Boston who are speaking out against bigotry and hate. Our country will soon come together as one." Ed is calling in from Atlanta on our Democratic line. What do you think, Ed? Should hate speech get protected by the First Amendment?
Yes, it should. But what I want to go back to is this man in office, his whole campaign was on hatred. So I'm not surprised at none of this stuff. I just hate to see it. It shouldn't be allowed. But it shouldn't have been allowed when he was running for president, telling people to hit people and he would pay their bail and all that stuff. So, they're getting what they asked for. So I just hope it'll get resolved in a peaceful manner, because this is really, really sad. Thank you.
Okay. Bill is calling in from Reading, Pennsylvania on a Republican line. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
I'll tell you what I think. I was in Europe for a whole month of June, and there's no free speech there. Okay? Hello?
No, I'm here. I'm listening, Bill. Go ahead.
Okay. There's no free speech there. A woman got home to go home after work, and she got burned by two people. You know what? The two people got 2 years imprisonment. So there's no free speech. Now, I want to tell you something. I've been here 62 years of my life from Greece. I came here when I was 9 years old. This got the most beautiful country in the world. I've been in many countries. People don't realize we have a free speech here. But the free speech, it doesn't give you the rights to go around, burn cities, kill people, stabbing people, and criticize. The only thing that I can think of, the Congress, they got one thing in the mind. You vote for me, what do I care? That's what their problem is. Vote for me, what do I care? But it doesn't work that way. They have to change their attitudes towards the American people, and the American people have to be more smart and stick together so we can get this country going. And that's what my friend Donald Trump wants to do, fix America in the right way. And God bless him. And I'm going to tell you something. If the people don't wise up in this country, we're going to go have a civil war. We're going to kill each other, and it doesn't make sense because we are all Americans. Remember that. We are all Americans. Remember, America. We have the right as everybody in this country.
Okay. Jonathan is calling in from Laguna Woods, California on our Democratic line. What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, good morning, and thank you for C-SPAN and Washington Journal and for usually good questions. But the question on screen today should the First Amendment protect hate speech is about as silly as asking is whether floods and hurricanes should be allowed. The more relevant question is, should civics be taught so that 228 years of constitutional litigation be understood, at least basically, by people who think that some speech should not be protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment does make that distinction between speech and action, and people should be taught and learn why it is so fundamental to our democracy that nobody in official capacity be making decisions about what is or is not hate, making decisions about speech content, but rather the importance of law enforcement protecting the right of particularly the most controversial speakers to speak and protecting their safety and right, and making that distinction between actions and pure speech. So that's my position. Thank you.
Okay. And the Washington Post had an opinion piece, which was before the Charlottesville and subsequent protests, but it said Supreme Court, it points out that the Supreme Court unanimously reaffirms that there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. This piece by Eugene Volokh points out from an opinion by the Supreme Court. It said Justice Samuel Alito in Matal v. Tam, the so-called Slants case, said the idea the government may restrict speech expressing ideas that offend strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. Speech that demeans on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, age, disability, or any other similar ground is hateful. But the proudest boast of our free speech jurisprudence is that we protect the freedom to express, quote, the thought that we hate. Mike's calling in from Ohio on our independent line. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I think this goes way back to the beginning of this country, the hate speech. You know, used to be a dead Indian is a good Indian, you know, some of that hate speech way back. And then the hate speech we were given after 9/11, you know, with the mushroom cloud, the yellow cake, and destruction of the Middle East that we created there with the Iraq War, just because, like Ann Richards said on Larry King that night, she says, the Bushes, they love war, they know how to make war, they make money off of war. And how much hate speech was we given then? I think it was 945 lies were given to the American people in the lead up to the Iraq War. And, you know, this is like we're living in a space-age fascist empire. We were given the Patriot Act, Citizens United, which I call corporate international weasels united, and the bribe money and the hate that goes with that. So, and then there's ALEC. We need to look into ALEC, what that has created, all the hate. But there's a lot to look at, a lot to think about. But anyway, there's a lot to talk about here, and I can't go into all of it. But thank you, and have a good day.
Okay, Ken is calling in from South Carolina on our Republican line. Ken, do you think that protection of hate speech should be the same as the protection of other kinds of speech?
Yes, I do. I think that you may not like it, you may think it's vile, anything else, but you've got to sit there and we are the best country in the world. But if you start limiting that what you say and what you can't say, I mean, I don't agree with a lot of things, like the last caller about criticizing the Bushes. I mean, I don't. I mean, you sit there and people, well, the last couple of weeks, I mean, they want to, instead of sitting there complaining, nobody comes up with an issue. But you have the right to say it. I mean, unless you're going to say I'm going to kill somebody or I'm going to do this, do that. No, we have rights and we have privileges in this country that no other country has. And you know, I just think it's ridiculous that all of a sudden people want to sit there and, oh, well, you can't say this, you can say that. It's just, unless it's and go back to the old ruse or anything else about yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. I mean that's something that nobody should do. But to sit there and have an opinion and then get modeled or want to be put in jail, like California right now, if you call somebody, well, they want to do this because a wrong adjective, if somebody's gay or something like that, they want to put you in jail. But what? This is not Germany. This is America. We have rights and we have privileges, and the privileges should be extended to everybody. I don't care who you are, what your color is, nothing. But it's just ridiculous that that you don't want to sit there and say, hey, you have the right to an opinion or you don't have a right to an opinion. You do have a right to an opinion.
Okay. And let's take a look at some of the responses that we're getting on Twitter. From Suki, it says, speech is a protected right, and like every right, it can be regulated to protect the safety of all. The First Amendment doesn't give a right to a platform. And then from A. Chaparral, it says hate speech should be protected by the First Amendment because what is considered hate speech is subjective and nebulous. Ed's calling from Memphis on our Democratic line. Hi, Ed.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Listen, I had a couple of points. First of all, your free speech ends when it threatens me and my family. I'm Jewish, and I've had to deal with it all my life. And I also grew up in the South, in Savannah, Georgia, and I grew up during Jim Crow. And I can remember when black people had no right to free speech, any free speech. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Okay. And Eugene is calling in from Georgia on our Republican line. Hi, Eugene.
Hello?
Yes, you're on. Good morning.
Good morning. I have to say, first of all, Donald Trump is a very good president. He's doing the best that he can do. As far as the hate speech goes, I'm Jewish as well, and I'm black, and I've lived in the South in Atlanta. And I think that this left movement, they're going around tearing something that's historical, and they shouldn't go around taking it down. It should stay up, and we should get over it. Everybody has their right to have everything. It's a sad part of history, but it's part of the American history. So I think that Donald Trump said everything right. I voted for Donald Trump. He's a very good president. He's doing the best that he can.
Okay. Margaret is calling in from Texas on our independent line. Margaret, what are your thoughts?
Well, good morning. I feel this issue is not phrased correctly when they say it's the left against the right. I am an independent, and I know people in both parties, some of them very conservative, who are appalled at this hate speech. What I feel it should be phrased as is those who believe in the values and the ethics that are supposed to be practiced in this country against those, speaking out against those who are professing hate, discrimination. I thought the woman who called and spoke about the history, I'm not sure where she was calling from, the history in Germany. The people, the good Germans who did not speak out at the time, were horrified when actually the Holocaust came and the tragedies that occurred in Germany, and it all began with hate speech. And what you read also from that court opinion, it shows that speech is not completely free. When free speech leads to harm to other people, it is regulated. And basically, that's all I have to say. It's not against the right against the left. It's the good, moral, ethical people in this country, no matter what political party they belong to, no matter what religion, speaking out against the hatred and the promoted harm towards other people. You look back in history, and there was the hate against the Jews, and it still is in the South. I live in the South. And against the Catholics, we forget about that they were persecuted in the South.
Okay.
So that is basically what I have to say. I think it is phrased incorrectly. It's the good, ethical, moral people against those who want to promote hate and harm against certain groups.
Okay. And in some other headlines today in the New York Times, it reports that the President and First Lady will not attend this year's Kennedy Center Honors event. It said the White House announced early Saturday that President Trump and the First Lady, Melania Trump, would not participate in this year's Kennedy Center Honors, quote, to allow the honorees to celebrate without any political distraction. The decision was another episode in an already fraught week for the White House. Mr. Trump has become increasingly isolated after a series of comments about the white supremacist marches in Charlottesville, Virginia. It will be only the fourth time in the program's 40-year history that a president will not be in attendance. And the story goes on to point out that several people, including Carmen de Lavalade, Lionel Richie, and Norman Lear, had decided before that not to attend the White House reception the night before the Kennedy Honors program. Teresa from the Bronx is calling in on our independent line. Teresa, do you think free speech should protect hate speech?
Yeah, I do. The tricky thing is who gets to decide what hate speech is. That's where it gets messy, because today it might be something that we all agree on. Tomorrow it might be your ideas or my ideas, and it can be used kind of like a jackboot to silence people. So I think the founders, a lot of people don't know, but they were oppressed. They came here with a set of values to help us not to live under that oppression, and part of it is to be free to say what we want to say. And I think part of it also is, people do get hurt when they hear hurtful things, but that is not violence. Violence is violence. Bad words are bad words, and there are laws to protect against the violence. So thank you. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
All right. Dell is calling in from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on our Democratic line. What are your thoughts, Dell?
Good morning. A couple interesting comments from the lady about Germany. You know what Germany did at the end of the war, as everybody forgets, is they put all these guys on trial and they hung them all. And that's what should have happened down south for their crimes against the United States. They were trying to form a nation of all the United States, Mexico, all of Central America, Panama, Colombia, and Brazil, and turn it into the largest slave state in the history of the world. I don't know where the civics teachers are at that they don't mention that, but this is what needed to be hung. Those Southern gentlemen had to hang by their neck till they were dead, and we wouldn't have any of this stuff. Okay? Thank you very much.
All right, and some other news today from The Hill. It reports that Secretary Mnuchin is responding to calls from 300 of his former classmates that he resigned. It says Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin defended his boss to his former Yale classmates on Saturday, saying President Trump did not think hate groups were equivalent and to peaceful counter-protesters who demonstrated in Charlottesville, Virginia last weekend. He says, while I find it hard to believe I should have to defend myself on this or the president, I feel compelled to let you know that the president is in no way, shape, or form believes that neo-Nazi and other hate groups who endorse violence are equivalent to groups that demonstrate in peaceful and lawful ways, Mnuchin said in a statement. He was responding to a letter which was signed by nearly 300 of his former Yale classmates, which pressured him to resign over Trump's controversial remarks over Charlottesville. Michael's calling in from Pompano Beach, Florida on our Republican line. Hi, Michael.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, a caller before hit it right on the head when they said, how do you define hate speech? Right now, it's obvious. Groups are saying, I hate blacks, I hate gays. Fine. A few months ago last year during the unrest, the civil unrest because of the police shootings, some popular quotes were no justice, no peace, and we all saw some fringe movement saying what they actually felt about police. Then again, they're obvious. Maybe they're treated differently, but those are outright gestures of hate. But if you think back of other rallies or riots here in the States or around the world, how about when the World Bank meets? I believe they met in Seattle a few years ago, and anarchists, or for lack of a better term, left-wing socialist groups, set fire to things, protesting about, the World Bank and capitalism. And then you remember in New York City with the 1% rallies. Those people were expressing hatred, but it was against people who make money. So in that case, it doesn't get quite the media attention. It doesn't get called leftist riots or
Michael,
political,
do you think those are the same, the type of anti-World Bank or Occupy Wall Street protests are the same as what we saw, for example, in Virginia when we saw white supremacist groups marching with torches?
Oh, that's great. Outwardly, overtly, meaning I hate the other person because of this or of that. But the question is, do we regulate hate speech? So in that very large umbrella, people shouting out their hatred of those who make more money for them, people shouting out their hatred for economic systems that they don't benefit from, and those people that run or enjoy those systems. I mean, like the caller said before, if you're just going to call it hate speech, we're in for a wide range of speech. Maybe if there's a category we could say hate meaning this. Another caller said when one actually advocates violence against another. So the Supreme Court has set some parameters for hate speech. If you say I hate somebody, that's okay. If you say I hate someone, let's go kill them, that's not okay. So you can't just regulate hate speech because, we're defining it on this television show and on mass media as the Klan, et cetera. But, after all, the very essence of civil unrest is because one group hates another. So just calling it hate speech, that presents a problem.
Okay. And on the front of today's Sunday Review in the New York Times, it dives into the effects of this speech. And in one editorial by Purdue University professor Roxane Gay, it gets to how the substance of this speech can make people feel. She writes, angry white men holding tiki torches and shouting their throats raw, chanting blood and soil, spittle hanging from their lips. Angry white men, arms outstretched in the Nazi salute. Angry white men playing soldier, heavily armed in public. Nazi flags, Confederate flags, American flags, Make America Great Again hats, bodies clashing, a slate gray car barreling into people standing up to racism, bodies flying. For the past week, I have seen hate thriving in plain sight. I am disgusted, I am angry, I am worried, and I keep thinking about how different things would be if Hillary Clinton had been elected president. I was, like so many of us, wildly overconfident about her chances. Her presidency was certainly in my mind and in my heart, and then it wasn't. Said instead, 2017, and white supremacists no longer feel the need to wear hoods to hide their racism and anti-Semitism. Freddie's calling in from Indianapolis on our Democratic line. Good morning, Freddie.
Good morning.
And what are your thoughts?
My feeling is this. When 25% of ignorant white people here in America feel like they should have the right to incite others to hate me and go out with an effort to do harm to me, their freedom of speech ends in the front of my gun barrel.
All right, Kelly is calling in from Bluefield, West Virginia on our independent line. What do you think, Kelly? Should hate speech get First Amendment protection?
Yes, I think it should get protection, and I don't agree with the white supremacists or the neo-Nazis. I just wish that everybody would have just let them protest, not been down there to stop them or anything like that, and then that would have not given them the media attention probably that they wanted. The thing that disturbs me is that a lot of them were wearing Trump pinch shirts and that doesn't sit right with me, because that's not what the president is voicing. So, I mean, if you're going to protest, fine, but don't wear a Trump Pence T-shirt and say that we're representing the president's ideas.
Well, Kelly, what do you think that the president has done enough to make clear to some of these groups that he does not support them and that his agenda is not meant to boost white supremacy?
Well, I think he said that. I mean, everybody's saying, well, he didn't come out and just specifically identify them, but I don't think anything that anybody would say is going to stop them from acting the way that they do.
Okay. John is calling in from Tennessee in our Republican line. Hi, John.
The Republicans stole my words a few minutes ago, but I will say this. The Democrats and the far left people, they do not want that. Hold on just a minute. Let me speak, please.
Nobody's stopping you, John. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I thought that must have been where you hung up the last caller. But anyways, because, look, they had a woman at a rally, at a Trump rally, hemmed up against a door, and it's on the news. Hold on just a minute, throwing eggs and spitting on her and all that bad stuff. So that's freedom of speech. I'm just telling you, it's going down a bad road. You start doing that. And while Trump's president and we got the Congress and the Senate, let's hurry up, make a good law. If any on the left promotes any type of hate, like I just described, him and that woman up the door and chasing people down the street. Yeah, the left wing's done that at a Trump rally, chasing them.
Well, John, let me ask you this. I mean, when it comes to chasing someone, assaulting someone, putting your hands on someone on either side, that's illegal. You can't do that. That's not speech. We're talking about speech. Just, there's no law against walking down the street carrying a torch, for example, saying things against Jews or blacks. Is that, aside from physical contact, do you think that that speech should get protection?
Look, they were trying to shut them down. So, because they didn't like what they were going for. So, do I think what?
Outside of conduct, John, the police can arrest you if you throw something at someone or if you chase them.
Well, they didn't arrest no one.
Okay. Marianne is calling in from Hudson, Florida on a Democratic line. Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
What do you think? Does hate speech deserve the same First Amendment protection as other speech?
I do not think hate speech should be protected. I think they should put themselves in the public eye, and our government should start checking on who they are. I never believed in hate speech, even as I grew up against people that were mean to me. I made sure I said to myself, remember, you don't like them, but don't hate them. And I think we should have more control in our government regarding the hate speech.
Well, Marianne, let me ask you this. What about the issue of who decides what is hate speech and what isn't? Isn't it too subjective to give the government the power to say, hey, we think your words are hateful if they're not intended to be, for example?
Well, when things are, let's face it, people know what words are hateful and how when people get carried away with what they're saying, people understand that, and our politicians should understand it and put some rules somewhere. I'm not a politician, but I know they have control. They can eliminate people that are bad for our country. If the Nazis want to change our government, send them out of the country. If they don't like it here, get out. That's how I look at it. This is a wonderful, wonderful country, and it's not meant for people like that.
Okay. Alan's calling in from Vienna, Virginia on our independent line. Hi, Alan.
Hi. I would first like to say that if you don't protest hate speech, shame on you. You don't protest it only because you are not the one being hated at. If you are the one being hated at, I think you would protest it very much. Also, your rights being hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment because a person's rights only extends as far as violating other people's rights. And when being threatened is definitely a violation of somebody's rights. And
Okay, Alan. How old are you, Alan?
I am 14.
All right. Thank you for calling today. And Larry is calling in from Fort Worth, Texas on our Democratic line. Hi, Larry.
How you doing? Good morning, C-SPAN. Well, I think that hate speech is fine. They should have the freedom. But terrorist groups like the KKK, neo-Nazis, they shouldn't have the freedom to do nothing, not even to walk the land here in the United States. No way.
Well, Larry, how do you draw the line between somebody who is deemed as being a member of a hate group and somebody who merely has strong opinions? Is there a slippery slope there if you take away rights for people based on their beliefs?
How I draw the line is when they carry the neo-Nazi signs and their Confederate flag marching as a KKK group. They shouldn't be allowed to walk the street. They shouldn't be allowed to protest or anything else. They are terrorist groups. They're known for killing blacks and Jews. Why you let the murderers have freedom? Why do they have freedom? If I go out and murder somebody, will I have the freedom? No, I'm locked up.
Okay. And Michael is calling in from Stamford, Connecticut on our independent line. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Hey, I live in the southern part of Connecticut, so I'm a New York Giants fan, and I really, really hate the Dallas Cowboys. I really hate Philadelphia Eagles, and I could talk about that all day long. And how is that going to someday be, I can't say I hate the Dallas Cowboys, I wish the guy would break his leg or something like that? When is hate speech going to be, how can you go that far? Hate speech is hate speech. I mean, these people are Nazis. That's insane. How anybody could back these people up, and all these racists and the KKKs. That's crazy too. But like I said, I hate the Cowboys. I love the Giants, and there you go. All right. Have a good day. Go Blue.
Janet's calling in from Winter Park, Florida on our Democratic line. What are your thoughts, Janet?
Yes, I think it's important to go to the actual text of the First Amendment, and within that text it says the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. When people are walking down the streets, especially at night with torches and guns and weapons and dressed as military, that is not people peaceably assembling. Also, threatening speech should not be protected. You can get arrested by making a verbal threat or a threat in an email. Threats like that cannot and should not be protected. You can say, I hate someone, but the minute you say that you're going to harm someone, that is not protected. And like I said, please read what it says. The founders put qualifiers in our amendments. The same thing with the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia. Those are qualifiers, and remember, the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances is what the First Amendment says.
Okay, and Doug is calling in from Lewis Center, Ohio on our Republican line. Good morning, Doug.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I do think free speech should be protected. What I really think about it is when people say stupid things, it reveals how stupid they are, and that's what these white supremacists are. And regarding it inciting violence, what I think black folks ought to do and the media ought to do is ignore these white supremacists, because by engaging them and covering them, we give them credibility. So I really honestly feel sorry for the white supremacists. To me, they look like they're missing a chromosome or two. I mean, they're idiots. So anyhow, yeah, I do support freedom of speech, and I don't think it should incite violence because these people have no credibility.
Okay. And coming up,